Tweets like that make me wish that we raced at Bristol 36 times a year. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. Late night, Saturday night edition, and boy, we've got a heck of a race to talk about. I just got done watching the race at Bristol, the night race this year, and I gotta say, I wasn't sure if this race was gonna be able to live up to the race we saw here in the spring, where, you know, I know it was rain delayed and postponed, but when the race actually started, that race in April or May or whatever it was chaotic. It was outstanding. It was a great race, maybe the best race of the year. So I was really not sure if this race was gonna even be able to come that close to living up to it, but oh boy, it lived up to it and more than likely exceeded it in almost every way. I'll start with what's probably the top story. Kyle Busch was out of his mind tonight. Started near the front, but on lap, like 2 or 3? Spun out in front of the field, caused a major wreck, ended a few people's day. Kyle Busch himself suffered significant damage on that car. At the time, most people thought he was basically done, had no chance of even coming back. He was probably going to go to the garage. They ended up only falling 2 laps down and spent basically the entire first 2/3 of the race trying to get back on the lead lap. But once they did, that car, the whole rear of it was basically missing. The whole driver's side door was bent in. He was able to drive that car from around 20th place into the top 10, into the top 5, and all the way up to 3rd place with less than like 60, 70 laps remaining. It was one of the most impressive comebacks I've ever seen. Now granted, Kyle Busch put himself in such a hole by just kind of spinning out on lap 3 or whatever it was. So, you know, it was kind of like a really low moment for Kyle Busch, followed by one of the highest moments I'd ever seen from Kyle Busch. I gotta say this, I'm not a Kyle Busch fan. Most of y'all know that I don't hate him, but I'm more than definitely not a Kyle Busch fan. But for that final second half of the race, when he was marching through the field in that torn up race car, I was rooting for him. I was getting super excited when he got to the top 10, then when he got to the top 5, was getting around guys like Chase Elliott. I was honestly thrilled because we were witnessing history, I felt like. I thought we were about to see the greatest comeback maybe in NASCAR history. But then he got into Martin Truex Jr. and wrecked Truex in what was a violent hit for him and JJ Yeley. So Kyle Busch spun him out while racing for 2nd place, and at that point I remembered who Kyle Busch was and why I don't root for him. And now maybe that's not totally fair for me to say. He didn't intentionally wreck him. It was a total accident, and he owned up to it on the radio immediately. And after the race, he apologized for it because it was obviously a mistake, and it was a bad mistake, but it was a mistake. So I'm not going to attack his character for this. But at that point, it was definitely a blemish, at least for a lot of fans watching the race. This weekend was full of highs and lows. He had the fastest car in the Xfinity race, high. Then he wrecked out early, kind of by his own doing. That was a pretty big low. And then coming into the Cup race, starting up front, looking great. And he wrecks on lap 3, whatever it was. And then, but man, he comes all the way back to the front with the torn up race car. And then he wrecks fellow championship contender Martin Truex Jr. So, highs and lows ultimately ended on a low for Busch. I don't want to make this whole episode talking about Kyle Busch, but goodness, he was the talk of the town. It kind of reminded me of when Ricky Stenhouse kind of got one a little off the rails at Daytona a few weeks ago when he caused a couple big wrecks. But needless to say, a lot of people were grumpy with Kyle Busch. Part of it is Kyle Busch. Anytime he does anything wrong, people like to pour on the hate for Kyle Busch. So, you know, but he asks for it too, because, you know, he's a hothead. He's full of himself, and it's kind of what makes him fun to root for and also fun to root against, is that he is so arrogant. He is so proud of himself. He's very cocky out there on the racetrack, and so it is fun to see him have a rough night from time to time like he did here at Bristol this whole weekend. But that's really all I have to say about Kyle Busch. He finished 20th, but you know, after that wreck, he was running still in the top 5 or top 10 after pit stops and was marching back towards the front until he got pinched into the wall by Johnson and Buescher, and that's what ultimately ended his day. So even after the drama with Truex, he had a shot at a top 5 still. But yeah, 20th for Busch. What an evening for that guy. He was the star of the show. I don't think he led a single lap, but he was the star as far as I'm concerned. Talking about the actual winner of the race, that was his brother, Kurt Busch. And Kurt Busch, the week after all these rumors about where he's going to be in 2019 start to come out, start to be leaked, the idea that he's probably going to Chip Ganassi, what's his sponsorship going to look like next year, all these rumors come out, and he follows that up by getting his first win in like 18 months? He hadn't won a race since Daytona in February of 2017, and he had a lot of tape on that car as well in that race. So to see Kurt Busch win here at Bristol, a track that he's had a lot of success at in his career, but it was a long time ago. Early in his career, he had success at Bristol. It's cool to see him get a win. It's another first-time winner for 2018, and, you know, it was neat. At the end of the race, he was trying to hold off Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott, both of which had slightly better tires, but Kurt Busch had the track position. He had probably the better handling car, at least than Larson. So he was able to hold on. Larson was 2nd, Chase Elliott 3rd, Logano 4th, who actually led for a while, looked pretty good tonight, and Eric Jones rounded out the top 5. We can go and look at the top 20 finishing results. I'll just kind of give you a quick rundown on some of the biggest, most notable finishers. I mentioned the top 5. Chase Elliott had one of the best cars. Logano led laps as well for at a couple different points. So a strong top 5 there. I think they all had easily top 7, top 8 cars, all of them. Clint Bowyer there in 6th. All of Stewart-Haas Racing looked really good. Almirola had a technical issue that forced him out of the race early, but you see Kurt Busch won. Harvick was good until he fell a lap down, had some problems, but Bowyer was always there around the top 5, top 10 as well. He looked like he could win the race until he kind of missed. He spun the tires on the second to last restart. That's what allowed Kurt Busch to take over the lead, and at that point, Bowyer's chances of winning dropped significantly. But still a good run for him. You got Ryan Blaney there in 7th, and a couple of Hendrick guys, Alex Bowman and Jimmy Johnson there in the top 10. Alex Bowman had a pretty up and down night. Honestly, 8th place is probably the highest he ran, so a solid finish for him. Continues to pad that points lead over 17th place on the chase grid, playoff grid, whatever it's called. Jimmy Johnson finishing 9th would be considered a good day by this year's standards, but honestly, he was running top 5 for a lot of this race. I don't think he ever really had a top 5 car, but due to some restarts and good pit calls and good pit stops, he was able to run up around there. I think around 6th, 7th, 8th is where he really was destined to finish tonight. 9th is okay. The problem with Bristol is it your finish really depends on where you line up on restarts, especially late race restarts. The outside is such an advantage over the inside, so it's kind of annoying that it is the way it is, but yeah. Bristol's so much fun in every other respect. We'll let that slide. Harvick, I mentioned, he did come back to finish 10th. He fell a couple laps down midway through the race, but he had a good car, was able to bounce back. Got the RCR cars there, but I want to mention Trevor Bayne, give him a shout out. I know he finished 11th, but to be honest, he ran around 8th, 9th place most of the evening, and that is really impressive. His teammate Ricky Stenhouse Jr. had one of the best cars all weekend, but I think it was a flat tire pretty early on that ended any hopes he had of having a good finish. But Trevor Bayne, the other Roush car out there, driving that 6 that has been consistently around 20th to 25th most weeks, was able to run inside the top 10 most of the night. That was really impressive. Bristol seems to be the one track that Roush Fenway maybe has figured out, so that's maybe something to build upon because, you know, Ricky Stenhouse running top 5 is one thing, but when Trevor Bayne was knocking on the door of trying to pass guys like Chase Elliott and Martin Truex Jr., my eyes were opened. I do wish Matt Kenseth had gotten the chance to drive the 6 car at Bristol because Bristol is one of his best tracks. I can only imagine if Bayne was able to run 11th, all credit to Bayne, he's a good driver. Man, Matt Kenseth could have run top 5. You don't know. I don't know. That might have been crazy. Hamlin, Kane, Keselowski. You know, Hamlin and Keselowski, really disappointing days. Kane, you know, with the big announcement this week, you know, solid finish. Reagan, Suarez 18th, a little disappointing, but you know, he got some damage in that initial wreck on lap 3 or whatever it was, so you know, 18th is what it is. Chris Buescher and Kyle Busch right out the top 20. Buescher actually had a pretty good run going tonight too. He was inside the top 15, even the top 10 at a lot of different points, but late in the race, when he and Johnson made heavy contact and then squoze Kyle Busch into the wall, that really ended Buescher's chances of having a really good finish. But still, there's your top 20. Pretty unique. Part of what makes these short tracks, especially like Bristol, fun is it feels like a lot of drivers say that this is their favorite track, and because of that, we see a lot of new faces up there near the front, like Stenhouse is running near the front, like Trevor Baynes this week, like Buescher. You got Kyle Larson who loves this track so much. You knew he was going to be a top 2 or 3 threat. The race here at Bristol tonight, I just want to wrap up by talking about the race itself, was outstanding. In my opinion, it was one of the top 3 races of the season. The other Bristol races is also probably in the top 3, so honestly, it was incredible. There's been debate the last few years, especially since they added progressive banking to Bristol and kind of had that high side come in. Is Bristol better when they're running the bottom, or is it better when they're able to run the top like they've been doing? While I love the old school bump and run, bottom, right around the bottom, kind of conveyor belt style Bristol, I gotta say, what we had this week, this whole season really at Bristol, but this weekend especially, tonight, was perfect. The bottom lane could work okay. You could make passes down there, but the top was probably still the preferred lane, but it wasn't always. I know they put all that PJ1 down there, so it is kind of manufactured, but still, the bottom lane and the top lane were fairly equal during runs. I know in restarts the top was way better, at least for the first lap or two, but for the most part, Bristol was truly a 2-groove track where, you know, you didn't have to bump a guy out of the way to pass him every single time. You could pass him on the bottom or on the high side, and you could maneuver the lap traffic a little bit easier. Honestly, the Bristol we saw here tonight, August 18th, 2018, was the best Bristol I've ever seen. That's my opinion. I know old school fans will be like, oh my goodness, how could you say such a thing? But I'll be honest, this Bristol tonight was perfect. I don't like it. It doesn't matter if it's Martinsville, Bristol, or Tempers Flare. I don't like it when there's only one lane around the track. Michigan has only one lane around the track, and I hate it. Bristol, I love it when it has 2 lanes. It doesn't matter, you know, Texas was better when it had 2 lanes. You know, 2 lanes is the best type of racetrack if you ask me, because you can move up if your car's not handling good on the bottom, you can move down if it's not handling good at the top, and you can pass in traffic. You know, the problem with Martinsville, the problem with Old Bristol, is you couldn't pass in traffic, or you had to hit the guy to pass him. And yeah, that creates tempers, but it's meaningless. You shouldn't have to hit a guy to pass him in NASCAR. That's not the way it's supposed to be. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. This race tonight gets a 9.8 out of 10. It was almost perfect. If Larson or Jones had managed to win, or Chase Elliott, maybe I would have given it a 10, but I'm not going to count that. Honestly, it's almost a perfect race here tonight. Tempers flaring. You had the bad guy go out early, rise back. All the fan base who hates Kyle Busch was like, oh, is he going to win this thing? Oh my goodness, are we going to regret everything? And then Kyle gets screwed over at the end of the day. The villain got what he deserves. This felt like a Hollywood movie in a lot of ways. If you're a fan of Kyle Busch, you could think of it as like the movie with a tragic ending. The hero goes down early when he wrecked on the beginning of the race, but he's manages to come back, and just before he manages to achieve the ultimate goal, it doesn't happen. So it's kind of like a tragic ending for the character. But of course, if you're like many of the fans who hate Kyle Busch, this is still like a Hollywood movie because the bad guy at the end of the day got what he deserves, because that crowd was cheering. When Kyle Busch finally really wrecked out at the end of the race for the final time, that crowd was cheering probably about as loud as I've heard since Martinsville 2015. And so that was pretty crazy. Actually, I guess I forgot about Chase Elliott's win a couple weeks ago. Yeah, that was probably a little louder. But still, the crowd loved seeing Kyle Busch get wrecked for good. So it was honestly a beautiful race. There's really nothing to complain about it. I mean, you can argue whether or not you liked bottom Bristol or top Bristol better. I thought this was the perfect version of Bristol, the best version of Bristol I've ever seen. Looked like the crowd was okay. Looked like the crowd was 50 to 60% full, which means there was 80, 90,000 people there, which is pretty big for a standard NASCAR race these days. So hopefully, if they continue to produce races like that tracks like Bristol will start to fill up a little bit more the next couple of years, because people say, racing hasn't been as good this year. We've had some outstanding races this season. I get really tired when I hear people say that the racing this year has sucked, because they clearly haven't watched more than a few races if they're saying that. The Daytona 500 was outstanding. The first Bristol was outstanding. Chicagoland was outstanding. And there's more that I can't even think of. The other Daytona was great. Watkins Glen, this Bristol here today, even Texas earlier the year was better than most Texas races. And I'm probably forgetting a couple others, but there have been so many remarkable races this year. It doesn't matter who won, maybe your guy didn't win or whatever. If we're talking about how, as far as the racing is concerned, there's been plenty of great races this year. And I know there's a lot that can be done to improve that, and hopefully NASCAR makes the right decisions going forward to do that. But I guess my point of this final rant is that we do need more short tracks. It doesn't matter what they do to the aero package to fix it on intermediate tracks, it's still probably never going to be as fun as these current short tracks are, like Bristol, like Martinsville, or even like Richmond sometimes. Honestly, I don't get why they don't just build another Bristol maybe on the West Coast or somewhere else. Just call it Bristol 2.0 and put it over there by like San Diego or something. Or bring it to Texas, please. But I'm just saying, we definitely need more short tracks. I know everyone's been saying that all year and for a long time now, but this race proves it now more than ever. This should open NASCAR's eyes. Short tracks are awesome. There's no other way to say it. So anyway, that's kind of the end of my point here. Thank you guys for watching. This is kind of an emotional, reactionary episode, I guess. Didn't talk a whole lot about substance. I really don't have my thoughts all. I don't even remember who won stage 1. There were so many passes for the lead, so many different passes throughout the pack, so many comers and goers and wrecks. I don't even remember where everybody finished. I'll have to gather my thoughts up later this week so I can have an episode up hopefully early in the next couple days for you guys. But yeah, this is a great race. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. All those links are down below in the description. And of course, thank you to Michael Harrison, Kyle Hill, and the rest of our Patreon sponsors. You guys keep this show rolling, and it means a lot to me. So you can also be a Patreon sponsor of the show if you check that link out down below as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for all of the support. Dex Tournament of Champions, the finale will be up in just a couple of days. I got a lot of work still ahead of me, but it'll be up in just a couple of days. So get excited, because that's going to be fun as well. You thought the race at Bristol was great. This race is... Honestly, I don't even think the stop motion race is going to be as good as this Bristol race. This Bristol race was perfect, but it's still going to be good. So get excited for that. I'm hyped. I hope you guys are too. See you later this week. That's all for me. Bye, everyone.